Hi, welcome to this on-maths prediction for the Edexcel Foundation Tier Maths GCSE Paper 3. Enjoy! Hi, welcome to our final prediction. I hope that the Paper 1 and Paper 2 have gone as you hoped. A lot of the comments I'm getting from my students and from looking at comments on the YouTube videos are kind of mixed. A lot of you liked Paper 1, a lot of you liked Paper 2, and that's always the way. Don't get put off if everyone else said they really enjoyed the paper and if they thought it was amazing and you didn't feel that way. Sometimes students feel they've done really badly, but actually they've done okay, or they've done really well sometimes. So to get a grade 4 on the foundation paper, you're looking at roughly maybe 45 marks out of 80, although no one ever really knows. So even if you have dropped some marks on one of the two papers we've had so far, you can still make them up on this last paper. So for the vast majority of you, everything is still to play for. Obviously, if you're looking for the grade 5, that's still achievable as well. So what I've done is I've looked through the Paper 1 and Paper 2. There are some topics which are common, like ratio and proportion, are commonly come up again. So there are going to be some questions on this paper that you might recognise, but it's kind of from a different angle, not literally sometimes. Don't forget that, like always, you can do this paper on our website, which should come up here right now as I speak. If you click on that, you can do this online. It's completely for free, and if you sign up, it saves your scores, but you don't need to sign up, and it changes the numbers on the questions, so you can try it as many times as you want. If you enjoy this video, please click like. Thank you to all of you who've liked the previous two videos, and if you want to see more from us, please click subscribe. I hope you enjoy the video. So in this question we're given a train timetable, and we've got 4 towns. We've got Ashcook, Flute, Risetown and Colib, and the bus is obviously starting at Ashcook and then finishing at Colib, passing through these towns as it goes. So it says that we arrive at 2017 at Ashcook. Now we will have missed this train and we'll have missed this train, but we'll be in time for this train, so we'll take the 2032 train. Now that will stop at Flute at 2052, but we're looking to see how quick we can get to Risetown, which is the next stop there. We'll get to Risetown 2124. To find the range from a list of numbers, you need to do the biggest take away the smallest. So the biggest number we have is 15 and the smallest number we have is 2. So we're going to do 15 take away 2, which is 13. Okay, so in this question we're asked to find the fraction of the shape that's shaded. So in total we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that are shaded. And we've got 8, 9, 10 squares in total. So the fraction is going to be 7, the amount shaded, over 10, which is the total amount of squares. To fill in this frequency column, all we've got to find is how many 11s, 12s, 13s and 14s there are. So I'm going to start with 11, and I can count 1, 2, 3 11s. Then 12s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 12s. 13s, 1, 13, and 14, 1, 2, 3. And it's a good idea in the exam to cross them out when you've counted them, and therefore you don't accidentally count them twice, and you can have a look and see if you've got any left over. What you could also do is add a tally chart to the table if it helps, but if you do a tally chart, make sure you write down the number as well. Okay, so this is a calculator question. First thing I'm going to do is type in 0.3 in the calculator, and then I'm going to look for a button that looks like this. Now some calculators show it slightly differently, so if you are not sure you can ask a teacher. You could also press this button, and again some calculators look slightly differently, and this just allows you to type in the power that you want, so you then press 2. So I'm going to press the x squared button and press equals. Now it might show up as a fraction. You might need to press the S to D button, which looks something like this on the Casio calculators. Again, other calculators might look different, and it's getting me the answer of 0.09. When collecting like terms, it's really important to know what is a like term and what isn't. This is an x term here, and we've got another x term here. But this is an x squared term here, and this is another x squared term. Now you can't add or subtract x's and x squareds. You can multiply them, but you can't add them or subtract them. So we're going to do the x squared first. So we've got 8x squared, take away 5x squared. That will give us 3x squared. And then we're going to do the x terms. So 14x plus 8x, which is plus 22x. And that is our answer. You can't simplify that anymore because you can't add x terms and x squared terms. Okay, so we're asked to write 5/9 as a percentage. Now to get from fractions to percentages, what we want to do is get to a decimal first. So to get from a fraction, which at the moment is 5/9, to a decimal, all you just do is 5 divided by 9, because over just means divide. So I'm going to do that on the calculator, 5 divided by 9, and it comes up with 0.555 blah blah blah. Okay, now to get to a percentage, all we do is we times the decimal by 100, so 0.555 blah blah blah. I'm going to keep it in the calculator and I'm going to times it by 100. So times by 100. And that gives me 55.55 blah blah blah. And to the nearest percent, well, this 5 here is going to push the 5 here up by 1, so it's going to be 56%. So to get from a fraction to a decimal, you just divide top and bottom, and to get from a decimal to a percentage, you times by 100. Okay, so the important thing to realise here is that all angles in a triangle add up to 180. So to find the missing one, we need to take away the 2 that we know, the 72 and the 63, away from 180. So 180 take away 72 plus 63, and that will equal 45. So x is 45 degrees, and you can check that by adding that to 63 and 72, and it gets 180. To work out the mean of a list of numbers, you first need to add them all together and then divide them by how many numbers you have. So we're going to do 3 plus 8 plus 10 plus 2 plus 8 plus 12. And we're going to divide them by how many we have. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to divide that by 6. So on my calculator, I'm going to add those together. And that equals 43. And always show what it equals in your working out. Then divide that by 6. Now that gives me 7.16 recurring. So to 2 decimal places, put my line down here, and it's going to be 7.17. That 6 will go up because this 6 here is 5 or more. So anytime the blue one is 5 or more, the left hand one will go up by 1. Okay, so we're asked to round to 3 significant figures. So what I'd try and do first is write the number down. Now, with significant figures, we start counting at the start of the number. We don't start counting at the decimal point. So I'm going to start counting here. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to draw a line down. Now, all the numbers to the right of that line are going to reset to 0. But before they do, we need to look at this number, and this is called our decider number. If that number that I've circled in blue is 5 or more, it means the 7 goes up to 8. If it's less than 5, the 7 stays the same. Now because it is 5, that 7 will go to an 8. Now be careful here, the numbers to the right don't disappear, and some students, when they've done decimal places, they think they just go away. With significant figures, you have to remember that they turn to 0. Now they do the same with decimal places, it's just because they're after the decimal point, we don't need them anymore. But these 3 zeros here are what we call placeholders. So, for instance, if you're asked to estimate the size of a crowd, and there was 207,518 people, you wouldn't say that that was roughly 208 people. You would say that's roughly 208,000 people. Okay, to simplify indices that are in a fraction, we've got to remember that this is actually just the same as x to the power of 11 divided by x to the power of 3. It means exactly the same thing. And when we simplify them, all we need to do is take away the powers. So that's going to be 11 take away 3, which is 8. So it's going to be x to the power of 8. Alright, so we're asked to find 8.9% of 457. So first of all, I'm just going to convert 8.9% into a decimal. So this is it as a percentage, and as a decimal, I'm just going to divide it by 100, and you always do that to percentages to find decimals. So 8.9 divided by 100, and that gives me 0.089. And all I need to do is get my quantity and times it by that decimal. So I'm going to times that by 457 equals, and it says 40.673, and it wants it to 2 decimal places. So that's going to be 40.67. Okay, so for this question we're asked to construct a pie chart from the table. We've got a number of frequencies. Now the first thing to do is work out how many frequencies we've got in total. So first calculation I'll make is adding up all the frequencies, and that calculator tells me is 24. Okay, now the problem we have is a circle has to add up to 360, and at the moment all of our frequencies add up to 24, so we've got to find out what we're going to multiply all these frequencies by to get them to add up to 360. We do that really simply by doing the calculation 360 divided by whatever the total of the frequencies are. So 360 divided by 24 on the calculator equals 15. So this 15 here, if we multiply all three of our numbers by 15, we will get the amount of degrees we need each colour to be. So I'm going to add an extra column here and say angle. And I'm going to do 14 times 15, and it's 210 degrees. 7 times 15 is 105 degrees, and 3 times 15 is 45 degrees. Now let's just check this. Let's add them up. 210 plus 105 plus 45 equals 360. And then you need to plot it onto the pie chart. Now, I don't have a protractor on this, so I can't physically do it. And to be honest, it's much more helpful to physically print this out, do it on a piece of paper, and get someone to help you use the protractor if you're not 100% sure. That 210, for instance, what I would do is probably draw a straight line down here, like a mini sort of working out line, and do 210 take away 180, which is 30, and do sort of 30 extra degrees, which is going to roughly be there. And don't forget to label them, so that would be red. 105 is just over 90, and I'm just doing this roughly. I'm not even going to use a straight line to show that it's not accurate, and then label that blue, and then check that you've got 45 left over, and hopefully you do, and then label that other. Okay, so we're asked to find the area of the shape above, and there are multiple ways of doing this. You can do this either by working out the big rectangle and taking away the bit you don't want. You can cut it up into 3 rectangles in 2 different ways. So the way I'm going to do it is, it might not be the same way as you do it. Alright, so I'm going to draw lines down here and down here, and I'm going to label these with A, B and C, and that will help me show the examiner what I'm doing. So I'm going to work out the areas of each individual rectangle. So rectangle A, I'm going to do first, and that's 4.3 times 5.6. Okay, so I got my calculator up. 4.3 times 5.6, and it gives me the answer of 24.08. Okay, I'm going to do probably rectangle C. Doesn't matter which order we do these. Now the height of this is also 5.6, okay, because it's 5.6 on the other side. So I'm going to do 1.2, which is the width, times the height, which is 5.6. So 1.2 times 5.6 is 6.72. Okay, now rectangle B is quite difficult because I don't actually have any of the lengths to it, either the width or the height. So I've got to work out the width. Now to do the width, I know that the total width of this L shape is 9.8, and the two bits I don't want are 4.3 and 1.2. So I'm going to do 9.8, take away 4.3, take away 1.2, and that leaves me with 4.3. So it's going to be 4.3 there. Okay, and looking at the height, the total height is 5.6. The bit I don't want is the 2.4 here. So the total height is 5.6. The bit I don't want is 2.4. So I'm going to do 5.6, take away 2.4, and that leaves me with 3.2. So for rectangle B, it's going to be 4.3 times 3.2. So I'm going to do it on my calculator. 4.3 times 3.2, which is 13.76. Now the total area is just all those added together. So I'm going to do 13.76 plus 6.72 plus 24.08. When I do that, I get 44.56. Now it says it wants to do decimal places, but it already is to do decimal places, so I don't need to do anything. Okay, so this question asks us to find all possible integer values. Now it's really important we understand that integer just means whole number, or whole numbers, I should say. Integer is just a whole number, so we're looking for all the whole numbers that are between -2 and 4, and that's all this is saying, that x is anywhere between -2 and 4. But because this doesn't have a line underneath it, it does not include that number, so it doesn't include -2. This one, however, does have a line underneath it, so it does include 4. So the first one's going to be -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and we include the 4, but we don't include the -2. So this is our answer. Okay, so we're told we are given 5 eggs to make 17 omelettes, and we're asked to find the amount of eggs required to make 67 omelettes. Now the easiest way, because this is a calculated question, is all we do is find out how many eggs are needed for one omelette, and then find out how many are needed for 67. So to get from 17 to 1, I divide by 17, and I'll do the same for this side. And then to get from 1 to 67, I times by 67. And there are other ways of doing this, times by 67, but this is by far the easiest, I think. So I'm going to do 5 divided by 17. That's obviously, I can leave that as a fraction, 5 over 17. And then times by 67, and I get 19.705 blah blah blah. Now with eggs you can only have a whole egg, so it's either going to be 19, 20, 21. Because we need over 19, we will need 20 in total. We'll just have some left over. If we had 19 eggs, it wouldn't be enough, so the answer will be 20. Okay, so we're asked to find the circumference of the circle. Now circumference is pi times the diameter, but here we're only given the radius. The radius is halfway across the circle. So to find the diameter, I need to times the radius by 2. So I'm going to do 2 times the 15, and that's going to be 30. So if halfway there across the circle is 15, the full way is going to be 30. So to find the circumference, I'm just going to do pi times 30. And so I'm going to do that on my calculator. So pi times 30. And I'm going to get 94.24777 blah blah blah. And 2 decimal places, that's going to be 94.25, because that's 7 rounds the 4 up to a 5. Okay, so for this question we are not really given a bearing at all. We're told that there's 98 degrees here, but that's not on bearing. However, we can use that 98 degrees to find the bearing that it's asking us for. The second important thing to realise in this question is we're asked for this bearing of the cinema from the train station. So we're at the train station and we're looking for the angle at the cinema, or the angle of the cinema. So we're looking for this angle here, which is the bearing of the cinema from the train station. So we first of all realise that all north lines are parallel. So we use the fact that we have parallel lines, and if that's 98 at the top right there, this is going to be 98 here. And the reason for that is that they are alternate angles. Therefore, if that's 98 and this whole thing here is a straight line, all I need to do is do 180 take away 98. So we're doing 180 take away that 98 to work out the angle, which is 82 degrees. So that's 82 degrees there, which is the bearing. But the most important thing we realise with bearings, actually it's not that important, however you could lose marks if you don't do it, is they have to be 3 figures. So we have to put a 0 before that if it's less than 100. So it's 082 degrees. Right, this question says there are only 4 colours in the box, and it gives us the probabilities of 3 of them: the blue, red, and white. Now we know that all of these added together have to equal 1. So what we want to do is start off with the 1 and take away all the probabilities that we know. So the blue, the red, the white, and when we do that, that will leave us with the yellow. So on the calculator, 1 take away brackets 0.09 plus 0.13 plus 0.18. And that gives me the answer of 0.6. Now if you don't have a calculator, it might be easier just to make these all percentages. So 100% take away 9% plus 13% plus 18%, and that will give you 60%, which is 0.6 as a decimal. So my answer is 0.6. Okay, so we're given the nth term here, and we're asked to find the 5th term. Now to find the 5th term, n is 5 on the 5th term, and that's really important to remember. So if you're asked to find a 5th term, it's just n equals 5. So feeding that into the expression there, it's going to be, instead of 20 times n, it's going to be 20 times 5, and then we're going to add 6. So 20 times 5 is 100, plus 6 would be 106. Okay, so there are quite a few different ways of doing this question. One way I'm going to show you now, the fact that £1 equals, not very good at drawing euros, 2.23 euros, and we need to get it equal to 2,676, and so we've got to work out how do you get from here to here. Now the way of doing that is 2676 divided by 2.23, and all on the calculator. So we know we've got to times that by 1200, which is what the calculator told me when I did 2676 divided by 2.23. Now I can check that by typing 2.23 times 1200, and it gives me 2676. So if that works that side, it has to be able to work this side as well. So I'm going to times this side by 1200, which is quite obvious. 1 times 1200 is going to be 1200, and that's going to be my answer, 1200. Now there's different ways of doing it, different ways of thinking about it. What you can think about is to get from pounds to euros, we times by 2.23. So therefore, to go the other way, we're going to divide by 2.23. And so you just do 2676 divided by 2.23. There's loads of different other ways of doing it. You can do it with ratios as well. Okay, so we're given a 9-sided polygon here with loads of angles on it, and we're asked to find out the angle x. So the formula for the angle sum in a polygon is 180 times n minus 2. So that's 180 times the amount of sides, which is 9 take away 2. So that's going to be 7 times 180, which is 1260. Now to work out x, I'm just going to have to remove or take away all of the angles. And I'm not going to write this down, but I would suggest writing this down you're working out. I can start you off. So I'll do 1260, take away, and then I'm going to start right next to the x. So 122 plus 128, and so on. I'm going to do it on the calculator. So 122 plus 128 plus 195 plus 145 plus 122 plus 144 plus 129 plus 131. Close brackets equals, and it comes up with 144. Now it might be sensible as I went along to cross them out or something, but I would heavily recommend, if there were that many numbers, which there probably won't be in the exam, and on the site there's slightly less numbers than this, that you just check your working out. So I've got the answer of 144. I can check that by adding them all up and seeing whether it equals 1260, which it does. So it's really important to remember y equals mx plus c. The plus c is the y-intercept and the m is the gradient. So the gradient is the number before the x, which is minus 2, and the y-intercept is the number at the end, which is 5. Okay, so the first thing to plot is the y-intercept, which is 5. So looking at the scale here, that's 6 there, so 5 would be here. And the y-intercept tells us for every one we go to the right, how far we go up. Now this is a bit interesting because we go 1 to the right here, but because it's minus 2, we're not going to go up 2, we're going to go down 2. So we're going to go here to about 3. So 2, 3 actually, not about 3. I'm going to do it again. So 1 to the right and 2 down. And there we go. So last thing to do is join all your points up with a straight line, and you need to do it with one straight line. I'm going to kind of do it in 2, and do it badly in 2. Okay, it's important that you do it just with one straight line, and the line is going to start where the graph starts and end where the graph ends. So our points are, so we started at 5, so our y-intercept was 5, then we went down 2, so we ended up at 3, and then we finally ended up at 1 when x was 2. So we have two spinners. Spinner 1 has 3 outcomes and spinner 2 has 7. So we're looking for the total amount of outcomes. So if we start writing down the outcomes, it might become obvious how many there will be. So I'm going to start with A and a 1. Then I'm going to stick with A and go for 2. So A2 and then A3. And you can quickly see that there's going to be 7 of those. So 7 outcomes with A. And now do the same with B. And again, you can see that there's going to be 7 outcomes with B. And we do the same with C. And there's going to be 7 of those. C4, 5, C6, and C7. So altogether, there are 7 with A, 7 with B, and 7 with C. So if we've got 3 outcomes on spinner 1 and 7 outcomes on spinner 2, all we need to do is multiply them together, and it shows us how many outcomes there are in total. So the answer is going to be 21. Okay, so we're asked to factorise, which means put this into brackets. So the first thing I would do is put a set of brackets down. It's a quadratic because there's an x squared, an x, and a number term. So I'm always going to put 2 sets of brackets. And because it says x squared there, and there's no number before it, the first 2 terms are going to be x. That's the nice easy bit. The slightly harder bit is working out what comes second in each of the brackets. So we've got to look at 2 numbers here. The number before the x is going to be our addition number, and the number left at the end, which is a positive 28, is going to be our multiplying number. So we need to find 2 numbers that add together to make minus 16 and times together to make 28. Now, the only pair of numbers that times together to make a positive are 2 positive or 2 negative. Now, if we had 2 positive numbers, we can't add them together to make negative 16. So something we do know right now is that both the numbers are negative. Now, we can take that out of our mind now. We don't need to worry about the negatives. So we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply together to make 28 and add together to make 16. Okay, remember, we're not thinking about the negatives for this anymore. So we're going to write down the factors of 28. So 1 times 28 is 28, but they add together to make 29. Well, that's not correct. We need to get 16. So 2 and 14. So let's add those together. That makes 16, so that's correct. Now, we obviously know that they're minus 2 and minus 14. So it's minus 2 and minus 14. Now, a common question is, does it matter which way around it is? Well, if you think about it, 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 2 is 6. They're both equal the same number. Okay, so it doesn't matter which way around you multiply something. So with the same with brackets, you could write x minus, in fact, why don't I write that as my answer? X minus 14, x minus 2. It doesn't matter which way around they are. Okay, so we're given the density and we're asked for the mass, and we can work out the volume. So the first thing I'm going to do is just draw my triangle, and it's density, mass at the top, volume at the bottom. So to work out mass, I'm going to do density times the volume. Okay, so we go, first of all, have to work out the volume. And of a cuboid, it's just timesing all the dimensions together, so 33 times 22 times 7. So 33 times 22 times 7 on the calculator, and I get 5,082. And so to work out density, to work out mass even, we're going to do volume, density times volume. So density is 2.1. Let's just check the units, grams per centimeters cubed, so that works. 2.1 times 5,082. So 2.1 times 5,082, and I get 10,672.2. Now check out the unit of mass in the density. It's grams per centimeters cubed. So that's going to be grams. Now be careful, because the answer is wanted in kilograms. So I'm going to divide that by 1,000 to get it in kilograms. And it says to 2 decimal places. So it's going to be 10.67. Okay, so in this question we're asked to construct the perpendicular of the line AB. Now, what it means by this is it wants a perfectly straight line going down through the line AB, but being the same distance from point A, which is this point here, and point B there. so it just wants a straight line down. Now there is only one succinct way of doing this, and I don't have a compass that will work with the computer. It will probably damage the monitor that I'm using. However, I'm going to try my best to show you what the examiner is expecting to see. So you need to put the compass point at A and measure about 3/4 of the distance to B. It doesn't really matter, but it just makes it a bit easier if it's about 3/4. If it's less than halfway, this won't work. And you draw an arc from A like so. Like that. Okay, and that's probably the best arc I've ever drawn freehand. But anyway, you do the same, but keep the same distance, but you do the same from B. So I'm going to do the same thing from B. And then what we need to do is you draw a line that connects where the two arcs, one from A and one from B, touched each other. So I'm going to try and do this. It won't look very convincing, so it should be something like this. But if it was perfect, I don't know how to do this. So I just try and go through both the arcs. There we go. Now if you did this properly with a compass, then you would get a perfect 90 degrees here. Now the reason I haven't is I haven't done it with a compass, but the examiner is expecting your working out to look like what I've just shown on screen. The working out should clearly show the arc you've drawn from A and the arc you've drawn from B, and the line down connecting the two arcs and making that perpendicular to the line AB. Okay, so we have a right angled triangle and we're asked to find the length AC, so it's the length between A and C. And I'm going to label that as a little c, and I'm going to label these two sides as little a and little b. And when we have two sides in a right angled triangle, we're trying to find the third side, we use Pythagoras. And Pythagoras says a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And let's put in the values. So a is 3.4, b is 5.2, and c is always the hypotenuse. Now to get the hypotenuse you just go across from the right angle. So the only one that's really important that we label correctly is this one here, the c. Okay, let's do our lines. And I'm going to type in on my calculator 3.4 squared plus 5.2 squared. And that gives me 38.6 equals c squared. And I'm going to square root both sides. So I'm going to press the square root button and then just answer, or I could type in 38.6, and that's 6.21. So AC, which I labelled as C, is 6.21. Now you can check your answer briefly. The hypotenuse must be the longest side, so that has to be longer than 5.2 and 3.4, which it is. Now a lot of people look at the word estimate and think, oh, let's just take a guess at it. The reason we're estimating is because of the first step that we have to do to answer this question. It doesn't mean that just have a quick punt and guess at it. With this question you won't be able to guess it correctly, or it'd be very, very unlikely. So we approach this the same as if it wasn't a group. However, we do have a group, so we've got to do a step first. This means that we've got a value somewhere between 0 and 4, including 4 but not including 0. Now the problem is that the first step in this method is to multiply these two numbers together, but you can't times somewhere between 0 and 4 by 14. So what we need to do first is find the midpoint. The reason we pick the midpoint is it's a good number to use to represent that group. If we assumed all those numbers were 0, then it would probably be ridiculously small. If we assume they were all 4, again it would be too high. So we assume that all those are 2 because it's right in the middle of the group, and chances are that most of them are closer to 2 than 0 or 4. So we find the midpoint of each of the groups, and a way of doing this is just adding the lowest and highest value together and dividing it by 2. Or just having a look, 4 to 8 will be 6, 8 to 12 halfway would be 10, 12 to 16 halfway would be 14, and 16 to 20 halfway would be 18. Then what we do is we get the frequencies and times them by the midpoints. So it's the same as if it wasn't a group now. So we do 14 times 2, which is 28, 6 times 6 is 36, 3 times 10 is 30, and then you can use a calculator for this, so 9 times 14, have an idea of what it's going to be. Hopefully it's 126, which it is, good, and 2 times 18, which is 36. And this is I call this the fx, although in this case we are calling the first one s, so it's the fs column. And then we need to find the sum of the fs column. So we're going to add up 28, 36, 30, 126 and 36 in the calculator, which is 256. And then we're going to sum up the frequencies, which is this column here. So 14 plus 6 plus 3 plus 9 plus 2, which is 34. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the 256, which is all our values added together, and divide it by 34. So 256 divided by 34. And I get the answer of 7.5294 blah blah blah. And to 2 decimal places, that's going to be 7.53. Now, the reason it's an estimate, as I've said before, is that we don't know that all the values in the first group are 2. We are estimating them to all be 2, even though we know that some of them will be 1, some of them will be 3. But chances are it will balance out that it's roughly going to be about 2 in that group, and 6 in the next group, and 10 in the group after. That's where the word estimate comes. The method for doing this is how I've shown it here. I don't believe there's any other methods you can use for this. When you're asked to find an equation of a line, which we are here, the important first thing to remember is this little equation formula here, y equals mx plus c. Now this gives you 2 things you've got to find, m and c. Once you find those things, you've answered the question. Now, the c is the easier of the 2 to find. The c represents where your line will hit the y-axis. So go down this line here and find out where the line crosses it, which is here. So it's at -2. So already I can say y equals mx and then plus -2, which just makes -2. So brilliant, I'm halfway there. Now the m is a little bit more complicated. For the m, you need to first of all find 2 points on that line that you know the coordinates to. Basically, if you can find out where the line crosses the grid lines, those are the best 2 to pick. Now, this y-intercept here is a perfect one to use. Going up the line, there really isn't any other coordinates. This one here, I kind of know it. It looks like about 2/3, but I don't know it for sure. So I keep going, and this one here, that's perfect. That one here, I know exactly what that is. That is 3, 2. Okay, then you draw a little triangle between those 2 points. So I draw that little triangle and find out how much y and x have changed. So y has changed 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So y has changed 4 squares and x has changed 1, 2, 3. So 3 squares. And then the gradient is, so let's just write this down. The gradient is the change in y over the change in x. So I said that y changed 4 and x changed 3. So it's 4 over 3. So we can then put that in. Y equals 4 over 3 x minus 2. Now you could write that as 1 1/3 as well. So 4/3 x minus 2. Now notice here that it is change in y over change in x. The most common mistake with this is to make it 3 over 4, but it's always change in y first with the gradient. Okay, so to do this question, I'm going to start off with a number line, and I'm going to put the number given to us in the question in the middle, So 89.6. Now it says it's the nearest tenth of a second, so what I want to do on the left hand side is put the next number down. So what could it have rounded to if it was slightly less? Well, the next one down would have been 89.5, and the next one up on the other side would have been 89.7. Now to find the bounds, we just find the halfway points, and this left hand one will be the lower bound, the right hand one will be the upper bound. So that's going to be 89.55 and 89.65. Now it says it wants it as an error interval and use t for the time. So we put t in the middle, then we put the greater than sign on the left hand side, and then just the normal inequality on the right hand side. Now these two signs here will always be the same. Okay, so when you're asked to do an error interval, it's that way around. So we're going to do our 89.55 on the left hand side and 89.65 on the right hand side. Now the reason why the inequality has an equals underneath it on the left hand side is it can be 89.55 and still round to 89.6. The reason it doesn't have one on the right hand side is 89.65 would have rounded to 89.7. So if you just remember, the things in the blue circles are always that way, and the letter it asks you for, just put in the middle. If it doesn't ask you for a letter, you can just pick any letter you want. You can call it X or something. And then the lower bound is on the left hand side and the upper bound is on the right hand side, and the lower bound's always here and the upper bound's always here. Okay, I understand the temptation in this question to say that the answer is 0. Please do not write that. Anything to the power of 0 is not 0. Anything to the power of 0 is 1. Now you can think about this. If you do x to the power of 5 divided by x to the power of 5, then the rule is that you take away the indices when you divide them, so it's x to the power of 0, and we know that any number divided by itself is always equal to 1. So the answer to this question is always going to be 1. Just try and remember that. Anything to the power of 0 is 1. Okay, so we're asked to solve this inequality, and the difference is that there are 3 parts to it. And we solve it in the same way as an equation. However, instead of just having one set of lines, we're going to have 2 sets of lines, and whatever we do, we've got to do to all 3 sides. So looking in the middle, we need that middle to be x, so we've got 3 timesing by the x, and we've got to take away 5. So we've got to deal with that take away 5 first. We're going to add 5 to all 3 sides, so we're going to end up with 21 here, still got 3x there, and we're going to have 30 there. Now it's a 3x, so we're going to divide all 3 sides by 3 to get x on its own. That's going to be 7, x, and 10. So my answer will be 7 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 10. Now this seems like a really easy question that you just do 11 divided by 6 and times by 7. The problem that gives us is it basically means if we add a student, it takes longer. Now the problem is that one looks at this question and thinks it's direct proportion. It's not, it's inverse proportion. So if we have a think about, well, let's label the 2 things. So we can have hours and students. Now h is inversely proportional to the amount of students you have. So h equals k, which is our constant, over s. The hours is 11, and the number of students is 6 in our example. So I'm going to put the lines in and times both sides by 6. So it's 66 equals k, or k equals 66. Then when I go back to this equation here, we know what k is, and k is a constant, so it's always going to stay the same. So it's 66 over the amount of students. So for our example, it says that there's 7 students, so h is going to be 66 over 7. So let's type that in, 66 divided by 7, and I get the answer of 9.428 blah blah blah. So it says it wants its 2 decimal places, so it's 9.43. Now, way of checking this is it took 6 students 11 hours. So you'd think with 7 students it would take less time, which it does here. So if you don't know or you forget how to do the inverse proportion, just literally times these two numbers together and then get that answer and divide it by this number here. Okay, so in this question we know a company is going to increase or has increased the number of chocolates in the bag by 15%. The bag now contains 69 chocolates, and we've got to work backwards to find out what originally it had. So the best way of doing this is think about what you would do if you were given the original amount, and then we just need to do the opposite of that. So we first of all want to find out the multiplier, so we start off with 100%, we increased it by 15%, and we now have 115%. And we want to convert that to a multiplier, so 115% divided by 100 is going to be 1.15. So that's our multiplier. So the step you would now do if you were given the original is you'd get that original amount, which we don't know, and you would times it by the multiplier, and you'd get the final amount, which we do know, which was 69. But we're given the final amount and we're trying to go backwards, and so what we want to do is do the inverse of this. The inverse of that is divide by 1.15 to find out what the original was. So we're working this way and we're going to divide it by 1.15. So I'm going to get my calculator out. 69 divided by 1.15, and it gives me the answer of 60. So there were originally 60 chocolates in the bag. Now you can then do 60 times 1.15 and check it works, and it comes up with the answer of 69. Okay, so in this question we're given a right angle triangle, and we've got 2 lengths and an angle. Now whenever we have that, with one of those being unknown, it's going to need trigonometry. So the first step of trigonometry is to mark the lengths. So I go opposite the right angle, and that's going to be the hypotenuse, it's the longest side. Then I'm going to go to the marked angle and go opposite that, and that actually just is called the opposite. And the one left over, and the one between the right angle and the marked angle is the adjacent, so I'm going to mark that A. Now one of these is boring, so I need to cross it out. Well, the O is the 2.4 next to it, the A is the X next to it, the H has nothing next to it, so let's get rid of that. The next step is to write down our SO, CA, TOA. And this is something you need to remember. And it's a collection of 3 triangles, SO, CA, and TOA. And we're going to cross out the 2 ones we're not going to use for this question. Well, we've crossed out the H, so SO and CA both have an H in it, so we're not going to use those. We're going to use the TOA. Now some of you at this step will just write down tan x equals O over A and continue, and that's absolutely fine by substituting the values. I'm going to do a slightly different method. I'm just going to do a big triangle, and I'm going to put in the values into this triangle. Now T stands for tan, the angle. Well, the angle in the question is 81, so it's going to be tan 81. Okay, the O stands for opposite, which in this question is 2.4. And the A stands for adjacent, so that's the X. Now the way of using this triangle is if we've got a number at the top and a number at the bottom and the unknowns at the bottom, then to get the unknown we do 2.4, the number at the top, divided by tan 81. So X equals 2.4 divided by tan 81. So I'm going to get my calculator, I'm going to press the fraction button, 2.4 at the top and tan 81 at the bottom. Now be careful to close the bracket. If you don't close the bracket on most calculators, you'll come up with an error. So if you get that error, just go back and put the closing bracket in after 81, and I get 0.38, and it's 0, 1, blah blah. but to 2 decimal places, that's just going to be 0.38. Now, I could add centimetres. It does have centimetres next to the x, so I don't need to, but I'm going to write it anyway. Okay, so whenever you're finding a stratified sample, you always have the number in the sample, and you times it by the fraction of that particular group that you're interested in. So our sample is 15, and we're going to times that by, well, it says the male who went to the log flume. So male who went to the log flume is here, and I think it says in the question there's 131. So it's going to be 31 of the people out of 131. So with the calculator, I'm going to do 15 times fraction button 31 over 131. Now that gives me 3.549 blah blah blah. And the important thing to realise is you can't have half a person, so you will need to round that. And I'm going to round that to 4. Okay, so we need the formula for a volume of a pyramid if we're going to work out the volume of a pyramid. And the formula is 1/3 times the area of the base times the height. Now the height has to hit the base at right angles, which this one does. So 1/3 times the area of the base, which is just going to be 20 times 20, times the height, which is 11. So I'm just going to type that into my calculator. So I'm going to do 20 times 20 times 11, and then equals, and then divide by 3. It's the same as timesing it by 1/3. So 1466.666 blah blah blah. So it's 2 decimal places, that's 1466.67 centimetres cubed. Okay, so for first thing we need to realise is we've got a bit of a circle, and the whole circle looks something like this. And we've got the radius of the circle, because that goes to the centre, which is 6 centimetres. And we're asked for the length of the arc. Now the arc is this length here, just on the outside here. And an arc is just a bit of a circumference. So to work out the arc length, we need to do the whole circumference, and we need to times it by the fraction of the circle we have. So to work out the whole circumference, we need to do pi times the diameter. Now we're given the radius, so if the radius is 6, the diameter is going to be 12. Then we need to times it by the fraction of the circle we have. Now we've been told that we've got 61 degrees, and in total there are 360 degrees. So as a fraction, that is going to be 61 over 360. So I'm going to get my calculator and type that in. Pi times 12 times, and I'm going to click the fraction button, 61 over 360 equals, and gives me the answer of 6.38790 blah blah blah. So it's 2 decimal places, that's going to be 6.39 centimetres. Okay, so we're asked to find the acceleration between 3 here and 5 seconds. Okay, so to do that, we need to know the equation. The equation is acceleration is change in velocity over time. So we've got to work out how much the velocity has changed. Well, it started at 90 and then ended at 200. So that's 110. So it's changed by 110. And the time is how many seconds? Well, it's 2 seconds. So it's going to be 55 meters per second squared. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. We've got plenty more on our website. Don't forget, this is a skills prediction, so we're only focused on what we call the AO1 questions, which are around 40% of your exam, 40 to 50%. The other 50%, you can practice using our demon questions on our sites, or our just normal predictions. You can go for our site. We've got topic-based assessments as well, or topic-based questions as well for you to try. We've also got topic buster videos, and we've got loads more. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed it, please click like, and if you want to see more from us, please click subscribe. Thank you very much.